Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today, as always on a Thursday, I'm joined by JP Mason. How you been? How you been, JP, since I last spoke to you?
Yeah, good, man. Just, I guess I spoke to you last Thursday, so Paddy's Day wasn't really Paddy's Day for me. I was working a gig. But I have to say, well, I'm glad I remembered that. Thank you very much to John Hewitt, who bought me a pint of Guinness in King Tut's on Friday night. It was really, really nice of him. I got a call on the radio saying somebody's bought you a pint of Guinness. You said on the show yesterday that you were looking forward to a pint of Guinness after your work, and John very kindly, he was coming to the Paul Draper Manson gig.
Yeah.
And he's a fan of the podcast and the show. So yeah, he got me a pint. It was really nice just to finish my work and have a pint of Guinness waiting for me, freshly poured. And that was my only pint of Guinness in St. Patrick's Day, unfortunately. So,
by the way, that's a massive shout out to John Hewitt and everybody else who does something kind just for the sake of doing it, JP. Because that makes a massive difference to your entire day. You're at your work, somebody does that. That's fantastic, and even just a wee positive comment makes a massive difference. So keep that coming, not just for Acsom, but just in general, because it's such a simple thing, JP, but it makes a huge, huge difference. It was like, I remember just last week, there was a couple of people over from Rotterdam for the Celtic game. And I had promised months ago that we would sort them out with a couple of tickets. But then obviously the logistics, dropping them off at hotels, everyone asked a dear friend of mine to help me out that was based in Glasgow so they could do it, the night before. Mm-hmm. And it's just that kindness, just doing something that just makes life so much easier for you. It's brilliant. So keep that coming. We love the positivity. Loads to discuss here. When you were on last week, JP, you were rushing away because you were going to go to St. Luke's for a gig. We are starting off with music for a gig with Damien Dempsey. And I'm a big fan of Damien Dempsey. And I've seen some footage that you sent over to me. It looked like a brilliant night.
Yeah, he did the old triangle as I hoped he might do. That was his first song in the encore, and the whole place singing along. With every single word, to be fair. And just him and his band, his tour manager Mick, and his engineer Jerry. I mean, I don't know if I've spoken to you since then, but Jerry, his sound engineer, is massive deal in that world in Ireland, and from Maynooth. And it took me an hour or so to figure out what song Maynooth was mentioned in, but it's Viva la Quinta Brigada. The word came from Maynooth. And we just had a really good chat when he arrived, and he was telling me all about, casually telling me the sort of things that he'd been involved with in Irish music. Like, he was the engineer with U2 when they started out. So like all the first sort of year and a half of U2's career, it was Jerry that was their engineer until he passed it over to a friend, because he had to take on something else that was probably bigger. I can't remember who it was, but he also did an Irish band called The Frames. You know those guys?
No,
really good band. I stumbled upon them through Spotify, and they're a really good band, and they were impressed that I knew who The Frames were, because they're not really, I think they're big in America, big in Ireland, but they never really landed over here. Really good band. And he also told me a story about how he felt kind of responsible for a certain Irish boy band that that came into fruition. Like, he told me he went for dinner with Louis Walsh, the X Factor guy. Louis booked in venues along from where he worked in Dublin in the early 90s, and Louis was looking for a producer for a band, for this band that he was working with, but didn't have any money, and he was really struggling to get somebody, and Jerry was like, Jerry's pals with Trevor Horn, as in like Buggles and Yes, and well, God knows what else Trevor Horn's done a lot. And he said, here's Trevor Horn's direct number, give him a call. And Louis Walsh was like, oh, will do. So he called him, and the next thing, Trevor Horn got on board and produced the band's first album, which I think had something like 5 number ones, and it was Boyzone.
Dear me, Boyzone.
So he played his part in them getting a game back in the start. So yeah, I'm absolutely certain if I'd got the chance to speak to him for longer, I would have got a lot more crack from him. But Damien was really sound and loved the venue, loved St Luke's. Said it was arguably one of his favourite gigs he's played in Glasgow, if not his favourite. He said it was better than the Barrowland, which a bold statement, but he was such a nice guy, and I look forward to. I'd love to see him, and I'd really like to see him in Ireland now. Now I've seen him in Scotland playing to what was a sold out, room full of maniac fans. I think seeing him somewhere in Dublin would be pretty awesome.
I know. So, should do it together. Do it as an Acsom recce, right? You mentioned Louis Walsh here. I remember it was in Christy Dignam's book, lead singer with Aslan, who's not doing too well just now. And he told a story that I don't know if he named Louis Walsh, but he told the story in such a way that you knew that's who he was talking about. Offered him a massive payment if he signed over the rights of his two biggest songs to the boy band that Louis Walsh was managing at the time, so that it would change to a co-writing credit, even though the band had never had anything to do with the writing of the two songs, which I think were Crazy World and This Is. And Christy said, no, I'm not doing it, because when I die, that's my legacy. I wrote these songs. So fair play to the wee man, who hopefully is doing well. Jungle Lion right in, nice and early as per. It's good to see you. The gap is 9 points, effectively 10. With the goal difference. But the narrative in the media the last month, you'd swear they won the cup and were top of the league, deluded. One of the reasons, Jungle Lion, that we are running with the tagline today, why the gap between Celtic and Rangers, isn't just the 9 points at the top of the league, JP, because I do listen to other platforms whereby Scottish football is discussed, and you hear it being discussed elsewhere on some mainstream platforms, particularly down south, and they don't seem to get the full gist of what the situation is. We're going to be talking about quite a bit of that during the show today, but yeah, the 9 points is there. That's where we're sitting at top of the league, 9 points ahead. Celtic's form's been tremendous. However, the gap in terms of the two football clubs is massive. It's absolutely seismic. It's huge at this moment in time. But I don't see many outlets actually discussing that. Now, I think when it's maybe outlets down south, there's maybe a naivety. They don't live and breathe the Scottish game. But I'm disappointed if I hear any outlets up here talking about Scottish football and they think the gap is only 9 points and Beale's doing this and that. Are they not looking at things like contracts being up in the summer, assets not being at the club, issues with regards to financial stability of Rangers? They don't seem to look at any of that, JP, because that's a bad news story, isn't it?
Well, it's just the age-old thing of trying to promote the two as being equal and the two as being connected and the two as being, for want of using the no campaign, better together. Like, I mean, that's what they'd have us believe. Yeah. And then the latest thing now is the ticket thing, where it's just reached this Mexican standoff whereby they are not yielding in terms of what they're doing with our allocation, and then vice versa with us. So I think we're as far away from them in every aspect as we've ever been in terms of stability, like you say, contracts. There's numerous assets in that Celtic squad. I don't care who you are. If you sit down and argue that their team could be picked apart and sold for vast sums of money, and ours couldn't. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's insanity. Our team, whether they like it or not, whether we like it or not, is full of people, full of players who we could turn for decent money. Maybe not insane money, maybe not Tierney money, but certainly money that will make a marked difference to what Ange Postecoglou can or can't do in the transfer windows that are coming up. Just talking about Abada. If Abada is wanting to go, and all the noises are that he seems to be the next person that's on that trajectory, isn't that okay? We'll miss his goals, but he's not really been that first team nailed on player. And if you can sell a guy that you've bought for, I don't know, what did we pay for him?
Just under 2.5. Yeah.
3. If we could turn him for somewhere between 10 and 15 million, that's a really, really good profit. And I would imagine there would be add-ons inserted into the contract as well because of his age, where he could go from there, whether or not he develops. But it was interesting hearing John Hughes. I listened to yesterday's podcast. It was interesting hearing what his dad thought of Crystal Palace, because you never really think of that about what a player may or may not think of their surroundings once they go down south. Because nowadays it's all painted as fast cars, or they'll be able to get a better car, they'll be able to get a more expensive watch, they'll live in a nicer place. But that's all fine and well. But when it comes, if you're actually into football and you care about what you're doing, if you suddenly are in an environment where winning doesn't really matter, and trophies aren't a regular thing, that could play into your psyche and be like, you maybe would think, as somebody said, ask Kieran Tierney how he feels now. I'm not saying Kieran Tierney's in a world of pain. I'm sure he's still having a good time at Arsenal, but in comparison to winning week in, week out, well, they are winning week out, but he's not playing week in, week out, and he's not winning trophies week in, week out. So I think that's a massive difference. So if there is players in our team that go with that tightrope, as to it could go one way for you and you don't really care about that, or like John Hughes Senior, he went down there and quickly realised this is completely different to the world I was in at Celtic. So, but yeah, I think that talking about the gap, I think they think there's some sort of miracle on the horizon for them, and there's not. Just, I mean, they need to happen what's happened to us in the last 2 years. They need that kind of turnaround, and whether or not they have the tools to do that, or the skills to do that, is another thing entirely. And in 2 years' time, if we're still doing this, talking on this, we can ask each other what their last 2 years look like. Yeah. That's ultimately the test. The test is in what happens in the next 2 years. And we, in the last 2 years, have won 2 trophies. We won 3 trophies, actually. We won the third one this season. We're on course for a 4th in the league title. And at this moment in time, you wouldn't bet against us winning a 5th. 5 out of 6 trophies in 2 seasons, post a season where we won nothing and were millions of points behind, and we were told that we were light years behind them and it was going to be a disaster. So it's not, has it? It's not been a disaster.
No, it's not, JP. And this is the thing that I think people, they either don't want to realise, or there's a lot of fans who probably always think, but we are insert name of team here, therefore we'll be all right. And a lot of people go to the football thinking that we're going to be all right. I mean, there's no way that when Rangers prior to 2012 were chucking money at all these massive signings. I mean, there's so many signings that didn't earn the transfer fees or the wages. I can't remember a single fan saying, where's the money coming from? Because football fans aren't built like that. Where's the money? So for me, the majority of fans are going to be looking at this going, yeah, we're only 9 points behind, And I've seen it even in the media where people who are experienced pundits are saying things like, yeah, but there's still 2 games against Celtic to go. So, the gap's only 3 points. And that's the way their mind's working, rather than looking under the bonnet of the situation and saying, actually, this is knackered. You're not going to get an Ange Postecoglou type character because you don't have that network. And it's the same with recruitment. Clubs are offered players all the time from agents, JP, and then you get this opportunity to bring a player in on loan or to buy a player. Celtic have got a strategy. We're not just relying on the phone ringing and an agent saying, oh, I've got this guy, do you fancy bringing him in? We have gone out. Exactly.
And we got away with it just because we still had a strong foothold in in decent markets where we were getting in decent signings. But there was a lot of that going on at Celtic. There's no two ways about it. We were just pandering to agents' phone calls and giving out contracts to people that were never going to be able to contribute on a serious level throughout a full season or whatever. Guys played a handful of games. Marvin Comper comes to mind, one game. And then there was that guy that you mentioned on the show, Rabu Ibrahim.
Ibrahim,
Ibrahim signing 2 games. Of course, I didn't remember him.
Can you remember Andre Blackman?
Yes, I do remember him. Did he not come? Was he a wing back? Or
he was, and he played a couple of games. He ended up at Inverness Cali. I think he's playing in the English 13th tier or something now. And he started off at Spurs, but we were constantly getting players in like that. And the problem now, JP, is the way that Ange plays. Not only does the player have to, be a decent player with talent, he needs to be able to fit a very specific role in the team, and that's where the data comes in, isn't it? So, we need to identify it through a strategy, which I think we are. Obviously, Ange has got an incredible knowledge of the Japanese market. We've tapped into other markets all over the world, and we continue to do that. And I just think that people aren't looking under the bonnet. They're not looking at the scenario and saying, actually, Celtic have got everything absolutely nailed on here. Not only have they got a fantastic team who are winning trophies, like you say, they've got a great managerial setup, brilliant recruitment strategy, money in the bank, assets on the park, strong contracts. I mean, we're talking about Abada, and we will talk about Abada. We're in control of that situation. If we fancy making 3 times the amount on him, we'll make it. If not, we've got his contract, and he's contracted to play for Celtic. And it was the same with Juranovic and Giakoumakis. And I like the way that Ange operates. And I think that if this is a situation, JP, and we don't know if it is, but if a player, through probably their agent, makes it known that they're not happy either with game time, or they've had a great World Cup and they want to move on. In Juranovic's case, maybe it was earlier than that. Or they're a young player who's come in and they've always seen Celtic as a platform to, a springboard into the English league. Then that's fine. I'm fine with the guys leaving. Because it was Tommy Burns that said it when John Collins, remember there was a contract wrangle with John Collins at the time, a player I rated so highly at the time. But Burns said, the minute you aren't 100% invested in this football club, you can go. You said it 2 seasons ago. The head's left the building, the feet can follow, and it's so true. I've really, really liked Giakoumakis and Juranovic, and I really like Abada. And I think that Abada, what he's got on his side is the fact that he's got age on his side. I think that he could potentially go to a bigger league than the previous 2 guys that we've just been speaking to. And, whether or not he then kicks on is another question, because, that's a big step up in terms of the league, the quality of the league, JP. I mean, I'm not saying it's a cakewalk for Celtic. We need to work for every single victory, as the Hibs game showed. But when you go down south, Gary Hooper, great example, it's not as easy as a lot of these guys think. I'll just go down there and continue to score loads of goals. It doesn't really work like that. But, I mean, with regards to Abada, I take into account the fact it's international break and there's so many outlets looking for a story. They're looking for the clicks. They need to continue with that traffic. So what about a bad news story for Celtic? We've seen that happen a couple of weeks before a derby game so many times. But there seems to be more in this one. Do you get the sense that this is going the same way as Juranovic and Giakoumakis?
Yeah, I guess so. Mainly because as the national team managers come out and said, has somebody not absolutely spilt the beans on this and said that he's not signed a new contract? Like, someone's actually put that out there.
It's the president of his former club. Has said in an interview that he's 90% sure that Abada will be moving to England in the summer, and that there was a discussion in January around an improved contract. And I don't know what that entailed, but apparently he refused to sign it. But that comes from the previous owner. I think it's the president of Abada's former club. But again, this is agents. It would be the agent that made sure that quote was made and then was circulated if he wants to start the ball rolling.
Is he not with Dahan? Is that not his? Or is he still? don't know if he's still with.
He has changed agents recently, and he moved to the same agent that Juranovic has, whose name escapes me, but he's now got the same agent. But there's a lot of mischief making in the background, isn't there? And a lot of that comes from the player's agent.
Yeah, I mean, they're always going to use the media as leverage to try and get the best deal for their client. I guess that happens all over, not just football. And I just hope that it's a seamless transition, and we've got, and judging by what we've seen in the last year and a half, why would we think otherwise, that there isn't somebody already been identified who's maybe even put pencil to paper, maybe not pen, but put pencil to paper on some sort of deal for the summer, so that a guy arrives as bad as walking out the other door. I've got no issue with that, because it just shows that we're forward planning. We're not getting ourselves into a position where there's guys in there that don't want to be here. Don't want to ever hear that again.
No,
that was the
beginning of the end.
I would say that's the worst. That was one of the worst moments of that season, because it was the wheels falling off before the wheels fell off, if you know what I mean. Because that, as soon as you knew that the transfer window's gone, we're in COVID, nobody's spending money, so you're well aware that you're stuck with numerous players that don't want to be playing for your club in a season where we're going for a historic title. And that was just that was the head and hands moment for me, where I just went, oh no, this is so wrong. And I don't think we had a choice with a lot of those players. People think that they were maybe, Peter Lawwell had a gun to their heads or whatever in the boardroom saying, right, you need to stay for the 10. And I don't necessarily think that was true. I just think that the transfer market wasn't what it was that summer. It's not revisionism. You can look back and see the amount of people that didn't move that summer because no one was sure about the landscape and how things were going to be in terms of, are we going to have fans back in the stadium? Turns out we didn't for a whole season. It was just horrible. So we don't ever want to be in that situation again. Obviously not in a pandemic ever again, but we also don't want to be in a position where we've held on to players too long and they're stale or whatever, and they're just not given 100%, which is what they should be given all the time. And the signs from the manager are that he won't tolerate that. Even a 5% dip, that's probably too much for him to tolerate. And he I don't think he'd be afraid to have that conversation with the player or the hierarchy to say, right, this guy needs to go. We need to accommodate his request. If he wants to go, we don't hold on to him. We give him the blessing to go elsewhere, and then we move on very swiftly if we haven't already.
The thing is, there, JP, you're spot on, right? The situation that night, after we basically got knocked out, because this is a thing as well. The European ties were one leg, remember? One leg ties, and we got bounced out. Ferencváros it was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That was that night, and we covered the game live. Myself, Kevin Maguire and Colin Watt covered that game, and there was just that sense that this wasn't going to work out the way we wanted it. You never want to be in that position again. You're spot on, and I think that Andrew's already put that message out there with regards to don't get too attached to these guys, because there's going to come a point in the natural evolution of this side or the natural evolution of that player's career that they're no longer going to be at the club. But you know what? The club's still going to be here. We'll still have a strategy. We'll still have a vision, and we will find somebody else to fit that particular role. I think Abada is a superb player. If he stayed with Celtic for another couple of years, I'd like to see him in the Champions League performing, because I don't think he did perform this season. I put him in the same bracket as Kyogo. I think him and Kyogo, I'd like to see them getting another bite of the cherry.
And
these guys who have almost acclimatized to that level, they've got another season of success under their belts, and then they can go back into the Champions League next season. I'd like to see it. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. One player, and by the way, before anybody misinterprets what I'm saying, I'm not saying Mikey Johnston's the answer to come back and then switch on to the right. But Mikey Johnston last night made his debut for Ireland. So we're talking about wingers. Let's talk about wee Mikey. He's one of a dozen players at the last count who are out on loan, JP. And like everybody else, I've seen probably the highlights of Mikey's substitute appearance for Ireland against Latvia. Stephen Kenny has got him in. He played his underage football for Scotland. He's now representing Ireland. And he looked revitalised in the small bit of footage that I've seen. And obviously there was a lot of chat about him. Now, I'm not going to dive in there and say, right, he's played X amount of minutes against Latvia. I'll bring him back. With regards to Mikey Johnston, do you see any future for him at Celtic, Tony Ralston style? Can he come back? Can he finally fulfil the potential that he has shown in very small flashes over the last 4 or 5 years?
I mean, it would probably be up there with the greatest comeback since Lazarus, because I mean, how he left Celtic with not many people shedding any tears that he was going. I think we spoke about it at the time. From what I remember saying was, he clearly just needs to play week in, week out to prove to himself that he can play week in, week out for a start, and then prove to others what he can do. I'm no expert on how he's been playing at Vitória Guimarães in Portugal. I don't really know his numbers. Maybe you could check that out while we're chatting. But I don't know how many games he's played. Obviously, to make the switch to Ireland, he's obviously had a conversation that they've said, right, well, you'll get game time. We'll involve you in the squads. It's not just signed up just to wear a tracksuit or whatever and go and jaunts here and there with the squad. So I wanted the guy to do well in Portugal. I wanted him to, just because he's a Celtic guy, he's come through our youth academy. Always seemed to have a reasonably good attitude. I didn't really see him or hear him moaning about his lack of game time or anything like that. He kept his mouth shut and just got his head down and tried to get on with things. I think some of the times he was played in not a great functioning Celtic side, and then played up front as well, where he was just kind of thrown to the wolves a little bit, or the lions. But I don't know if he could come back and suddenly become a first team player at Celtic. It would depend on Postecoglou's assessment of him then and now. Like, because obviously Postecoglou felt that he had to go out and loan because he wasn't right at that time to be a player in his team. But you're not going to tell me that Postecoglou hasn't studied every bit of what he's been doing while he's been out there. I don't think it's been out of sight, out of mind. He'll have been paying attention a lot better than you or I on what he has or hasn't done over there. He'll speak to the coaches over there. He'll get a feeling of how he's been day in, day out. Because it's all very well having a 5-minute flash against, Latvia last night, but those aren't the things that are going to... I don't think Postecoglou's going to see that footage and be like, all right, maybe I'll take him back then. I mean, it's all about his work ethic, day in, day out, how he is on his bad days, all that sort of stuff. So I don't think it's just a case of, suddenly we see him doing some stepovers and looking like a wonder kid in an international game as a substitute. I don't think that suddenly... For the Celtic fans as well, I don't think... I mean, there was a lot of people jokingly putting up sort of apologies to Mikey Johnston last night. I saw a few on Twitter, just sort of people sort of saying all is forgiven and things like that, because I don't doubt that the idea of him in an Ireland shirt could potentially change the perception amongst some fans of Mikey Johnston. The fact that he now wears an Ireland shirt could be a thing that would make endear him to people a little more than previously. And if that's part of the Mikey Johnston glow up, then so be it. But I just like the guy to have a good career, because you never want to see a player's career just sort of traipse off and go down divisions and and then you hear about them playing for like the local amateur side or whatever, and you're like, wait a minute, that guy was playing for Celtic. How has that happened? How is he at that level to play at Celtic Football Club, first team football at Celtic Football Club, and then not at least had a decent career? You know, I'm talking about at a decent level, maybe winning a trophy or something like that at whatever league you're playing in. That's what I would want for any Celtic player that's been through our system or played for our club, because I don't know, you just wish your own to do well, and you think, well, if they're Celtic fans, if I was him, I would be wanting people to wish me well if I'd been a player.
Yeah.
So
he's only 23. I mean, he's 24 next month, but he's only 23. And you look at the loan deal, because we always say, well, did the loan deal benefit either him or the club? Well, so far it's benefited him because he's got an international call-up. We know that Stephen Kenny likes to use wingers. So when he's playing for Ireland, I'm pretty sure that he'll thrive under Stephen Kenny for as long as Stephen Kenny's in charge. But you asked the question about the games that he's played over in Portugal, JP. So he has made 22 appearances, scoring 3 goals and claiming 3 assists. But if you look at the actual game time, in those 22 appearances, he's averaging 46 minutes per appearance. So I think that tells a wee story as well, that he's not getting the 90 minutes. He's maybe not a first pick. I remember when he went to Portugal, first couple of games, I think he got a couple of goals. I think he really started flying. And when you look at the jinx and what he did last night, I'm pretty sure Ange Postecoglou has seen plenty of that at training.
Yeah.
But, you know, judging by some of the comments that have been made by Celtic players, they have said that Mikey is one of the most naturally talented footballers at the club. And somebody made a comment yesterday in relation to if you could only add Abada's finishing to Mikey Johnston's jinkiness and talent and all the rest, that you'd have the complete player. Doesn't work like that, unfortunately. But like yourself, I just hope that it works out. There is a suggestion that it won't be at the club that he has been loaned out to now. You've got to remember these guys have done well and been given improved deals. I think Mikey Johnston's on $8,000 a week or something like that. So the chances of him then going out to a team in Scotland on anything other than a loan deal is slim to none, because there was a few suggestions last night that, you know, this team or that team would really benefit from a player like Mikey, and they probably would. I mean, he would thrive at a couple of clubs in Scotland, but it's the deal. He's on a very, very good deal at Celtic. So, you know, maybe trying to find his way like Jack Hendry did in Belgium. If he can find his way, if he can maybe impress another Portuguese club while he's over there, JP, then that's probably where he's best suited. Now, David Boyle is back on the comments on the YouTube channel. Thanks everybody for getting involved. The subscribers are going up. It is an absolutely free channel, and we are putting on as many shows as we possibly can. You might have noticed we were back last night, JP, with Kevin Graham and Screamer Celica. It's been a while, but it was time for us to get back in the saddle. Afternoon troops, did anyone see wee Mikey Johnston last night? He was like a man reborn. What do we think of giving him one more chance and boosting our homegrown quota for Europe? That could well be a consideration as well, actually, the homegrown quota, depending on who comes into the club in the summer. Mikey Johnston had his dancing boots on last night, and I think, like you say, the whole perception has been positive around that performance last night. Joe Hamilton, I'd like to see the gap if we had unbiased refs and a good afternoon troops in the hoops. We'll get onto that, because obviously VAR isn't just annoying Celtic and Celtic fans. There are other clubs up in arms in relation to that. And Paddy asks the question, JP, what is that top behind you? Let's have a wee chat about that top before we go any further.
It's Malta. I got it where I like to get tops when I go on holiday, and I got a Maltese top from the National Stadium shop. I got a taxi all the way out. Got a taxi all the way out to the stadium, and arrived, and it looked like it was shut. The shutters were down on the club shop, and I was wandering around the inside the Maltese National Stadium, and I came across a desk, and I just said, "Do you know what time the shop opens at?" And she was like, "Oh, I'll open it for you." And she just wandered along the corridor with me and thing with the shutters, and the next thing I got like a private viewing of the Maltese football national store. So I obviously picked the green one. My dad had the Maltese cross, on our patio. He was obsessed with the Knights of St. John and all of that. So it reminds me of our house when I was a wee guy. So obviously green and white as well. I wasn't going to leave that behind. There was red and white ones obviously for the Maltese colours, but as soon as I saw a green one, I was like, get that. So
Diodora as well. It's a nice throwback to the 90s.
No, it's not. It's Givova.
That looks like Diodora from here, mate, but my eyesight's not the best.
Givova, Givova, so it must be a Maltese sporting brand, I don't know. But International Week, so there you go. A Maltese international top.
That's why it's up there. Have you ever had a Maltese player? Have Celtic ever had a Maltese player? That's a good question. Ewan Boy Martin is watching all the way from sunny Dunoon. Lucky you if you're getting a wee bit of the sunshine. And Gary Melrose, this leads us on to a wee chat afternoon, all from a sunny Peterhead. Here be Dragons. Now, Peterhead obviously was the former club of Simon Ferry. Simon Ferry leads us on to the next two subjects, actually. He'll be playing for Celtic against the Liverpool legends, in inverted commas, because people might say they're not legends. I would prefer to call it a select side, JP, because then nobody can argue. But there was some news breaking yesterday around the Open Goal partnership with Open Goal Broomhill. That's going to come to an end. And two former Celts in Paul Slane and Simon Ferry will be leaving the club. I thought it was a hugely ambitious venture for a media platform to get involved with a football club. JP, tip my hat to that. Massively ambitious. Did you think it was always going to end this way, though?
Maybe not an announcement in March that they would be leaving at the end of the season. Normally, you don't really get that grace, do you? You don't really get the time to sort of work your ticket. I think it's always a bit strange when something's announced before the end of a season that something significant like that's going to happen. I think you think back to Rangers, God love them, when they announced that Walter Smith was leaving at the end of the season, in that season of seasons, 97-98. I mean, they all would say that was the wrong move to have announced that, because it just didn't seem right that was known in the wider circles that was going to happen. So I think with this, I mean, it doesn't really show a great a level of ambition from the club, because you think if there's something wrong, then why not deal with it now rather than wait till the end of the season? Because I don't know, it just gives the potential new manager time to come in and do what they need to do ahead of the summer. So I don't know. I don't know enough about the actual in and outs of the situation, or the arrangement or anything like that. It did seem a bit strange that it was even a thing in the first place, but they're obviously ambitious guys, and I think Simon Ferry, well, he can be called a legend in Celtic terms. What he's done with Open Goal, to take that to the Hydro. When I saw that was going to be in the Hydro, I was like, no way in the world are they selling Hydro. Not even half of it, I didn't think. And then they knew their audience, they knew their numbers, and they did it. And that is an incredible thing to have done. It's now become.
Did they do it twice? JP?
They did. Yeah, I think the second time, I don't know if maybe it did sell out the second time. I know it definitely sold out the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And if it didn't sell out the second time, then it probably wasn't a bit off it. But I think massive respect to them for what they've done. You can't help but respect that, because it's not easy to take something that you do online to then take it out and do it live to that many people, because
it's incredible.
It was a bit of a gamble, I think, for them to bite off such a big piece straight away. There was no gradual build up. There was no, all right, let's do a Motherwell Civic Centre or Motherwell Concert Hall or something like that, and then we'll do a pavilion or something. It was just like, no, let's go straight to the Hydro. Let's go straight to the top of the pile, and we'll go for it. And people bought into the story and the sort of fairy tale of it. So that's probably why they've decided to go and try and do other things like run a football club, but I don't think it's maybe necessarily the easiest thing to do when you've not got the years of experience and the skill set and everything to do something like that. I think it's maybe a bit ambitious, but good luck to them.
I know, and a bottomless pit of money I think you need if you're going to run any football club.
Yeah.
If Acsom was to buy a football club, JP, what would your position be, mate? Would you still be on the park, or would you be kind of behind the scenes in the dugout?
Stadium announcer / DJ.
DJ. We'd be getting the pre-match bands on a bandstand outside the stadium.
I would love nothing more than to be able to choose songs that would wind up opposition. You know how sometimes that's happened at Celtic, but did Tiger Tim not get his jotters for playing?
Poor Tiger. Poor Tiger. He came on and he asked for a minute's silence because Rangers got knocked out of Europe. And he got sacked. He got sacked for it. And now we're just bamming them up by putting on Lucky Man by the Verve and all that kind of stuff, which is tremendous. Some great comments coming in. Thanks for reminding us if you're in a more sunny climes. All the best, boys and girls from Tenerife. Hopefully it's nice and sunny there and the beer is chilling. Keith Oakton is in Plymouth. As always, good to hear from you. And also, you know, today would have been the 85th birthday of the one and only Bertie Auld, who passed away, of course, on the 14th of November, 2021. And people go on about legendary figures of the club, and he's certainly that, absolutely part of the folklore of Celtic Football Club. But I'm going to ask you a question here. People going about who's the best striker at Celtic, who's the best player, who was the most entertaining. I'm going to ask you, JP, was Bertie Auld the biggest personality that Celtic have ever had?
I mean, it would be hard to argue against that because he crossed generations to the point that, you know, youngsters knew who he was, and he was really side with them. Like I saw him in the reception at Celtic Park once, and you know there was wee guys going up to him to get pictures with him and things like that, and that's because that's been passed down. So if you think about how many people knew who Bertie Auld was, there's not many from that era that did kind of cross into the younger generation. I mean, I'm sure any notable Celtic ex-player could be pointed out by their dad or their granddad or whatever, but Bertie Auld seemed to sort of transcend generations. And I remember when he passed away, there was so many pictures being shared on Twitter of people with Bertie Auld, but it was people of all ages. It wasn't all people who would have grown up seen him play or whatnot. It was just people's kids, people's grandchildren, and they were all seemed to be really, really happy to have met the man. And I've met him a couple of times, and he was just an absolute dynamo. He was always on, always switched on. Didn't ever. I don't think you ever would have seen him sort of down on his luck or anything like that. He knew his place in Celtic's history, and he completely and utterly embraced it. And
you imagine every day. I know, but imagine every day being somebody like Bertie and knowing every time you leave your house, JP, that the chances are several people are going to approach you in the street, and always being on it. Always being Bertie, always being in a good mood, always being full of fun and full of life. And that's what I keep saying it. I think he's the biggest personality. I can't think of one who's
well,
bigger.
I mean, that obviously he lifted the big cup, and we were talking to Martin Vikhorst and Mark Reaper a few weeks ago.
That's still bizarre that we did that.
Very. And then I said to Mark about I'm going skiing in Austria and how he would probably be recognised. And then we started talking about how players that haven't even had that much success with Celtic are recognised and asked for pictures and things like that. So it stands to reason that a guy like Bertie Auld, who was full of the chat, full of the song, but also played in Celtic's greatest ever game, you know, and to have that as well, then it stands to reason that he's going to appeal to so many people. He just kind of felt like a kind of granddad figure I mean, I'm maybe not to the older generation, but to me, it just felt like a kind of Celtic granddad that had been there all the time and loved being around Celtic fans. You either do or you don't. It was not put on with him, I don't think, one bit. I think he genuinely appreciated, like I say, appreciated his place in Celtic's history and readily embraced it on every opportunity.
No, absolutely. And the image I think that I always think about is after Leeds United, when we've knocked them out of the European Cup semi-final in 1970, and Bertie Auld on there, and apparently he's nicked the hat. I only found this out last week. The hat that he's wearing is like a wee bowler hat. He nicked it off one of the photographers at the side of the park who was sitting with his hat on, and he's nabbed it. He's put it on. He's walking about with a shirt off. I think he's got maybe a Leeds United jersey either in his hand or he's got the ball in his hand. It's an iconic image, and it's a tremendous image. I'd love to know what happened to the hat. Keith Oakden, I went to the Barras on Saturday night to see Stiff Little Fingers after being at the game on Saturday. What a day. We used to run a bus from the villages in Fife, the West Fife villages, every year to see Stiff Little Fingers in the Barras, and they're still doing it.
It was always Paddy's Day, wasn't it?
It was always around that, aye. And I remember I'm not like you, I don't keep all my tickets like you do, JP, but I do. Either I've got it or my brother's got the ticket from back in the day when we went to see them. Don't tease us, lads. Get yourself over to Ireland. Gary, listen, watch the space. That's all I'm saying. And we've also got Mark Gill. The gap was only 9 points because of certain refs supporting Rangers. It's as simple as that. Just look at VAR decisions that affect us, but not them. Honest mistakes? I don't think so. Right. Now, we're not going to labour the VAR thing because I think we've spoken about it a fair bit this week and this year. However, when we look at the situation that we're currently in, JP, and it's not just Celtic and Celtic fans, as I said earlier, who are unhappy with it. Hibs have spoken out recently. Dundee United have demanded or requested a meeting between the SFA and all the other clubs in the league. It's pretty clear this hasn't worked. The introduction of VAR hasn't worked. But what it has done is it has highlighted, if we didn't already know, it has highlighted on maybe a bigger scale the issues that we have with officiating in this country. And my suggestion on Monday was that we just tear it up and we start again. We go professional. Referees have to be professional. Let's have a proper system in place where we have every year a new batch coming through a system like we do with coaches at Largs. That was the example I used, and become a renowned hotbed for quality refereeing and completely tear it up and start again. If we then want to introduce a better version of VAR, because we've obviously got the really cheap version, go and buy a lot of the images, JP, then do that. But I think getting the referees right is paramount, and it's a priority over the VAR, in my opinion. Where are you on it?
I think they probably, if it was to be a public thing whereby they did do that, that's a hell of a step down on their part, because it's admitting that they've made a mess of it or that they've not implemented it in the proper way. I think maybe if they were to do some sort of review at the end of the season, because bear in mind we've not even had a full season of it. This came in. When did it come in? November.
Yeah, and it was rushed in.
Aye, so we've not even had a full season of it to properly review it. But you'd like to think that given the blame, not the blame, but you had to think that the amount of things that have been thrown about VAR from various different quarters, mostly bad. A lot of people have tried to point out and say, "Oh, Celtic are the only club that didn't want VAR." Like, that's absolute nonsense. I don't think you could say for a second that we knew what sort of VAR we were getting. This isn't how I saw it in terms of what you would get. There shouldn't be inconsistencies. It should be you're getting decisions right, and that's it. End of. It was interesting hearing Mikael Lustig. I know he was talking about the event with Scott Brown in May, but he was obviously asked about VAR, and he said, "Well, in Sweden we don't have it. We don't have VAR because the supporters voted against it. We're the only club, the only league in Europe that doesn't have VAR." I don't know if he was right about that or if he was saying it with like full authority, but I don't recall being asked as a season ticket holder at Celtic whether or not I wanted VAR. I mean, if I'm being honest, I didn't want it. I knew that it was going to disrupt the game. And you could go down to the base level of, oh, well, it stops you celebrating a goal because you don't know if you're going to have to reevaluate your celebration in a couple of minutes once they've looked at a goal and decided that it's not actually a goal. And then you look like a tube because you've celebrated wildly. You know what I mean? There's not been any VAR instance in a Rangers game yet that's been controversial. But imagine we score an absolutely brilliant goal against them. The place is going wild.
Yes.
And then they go, actually, no, that's not a goal. I mean, and then you can't see, you're at the game, you can't see what's happened. You're relying on maybe a text coming through to tell you. I mean, I got a text on Saturday about the Carter Vickers sending off.
And you're at the game.
And I'm texting, and I'm like, I don't like texting at the game. I hate getting people text me at the game and maybe want to have a conversation. I'm like, I'm watching the game. Or they want to talk about the game if they're at home watching the game. I don't want to talk to anybody while I'm at the game. I put my phone away. I take a short bit of video clip to remember that particular game. I take one picture maybe of the start, and then my phone's in my pocket, and I'm not interested in anything other than the game. However, I was quite keen to find out about the Carter Vickers sending off, and I got sent it, and I was like scrubbing it back and forward when there was a stoppage in play to see what happened. And I still think that the guy was harshly treated. I think you have to make allowances for the fact that Carter Vickers and him were in a tussle. Carter Vickers puts his head down a little bit lower than you would normally do. Ewan makes a pretty daft decision to do what he did, but I don't think there was any malice in it. And I thought it was a bit harsh. I've not seen either penalty back. I've not seen our penalty with Carter Vickers going down or Starfelt's shirt pull. Again, I was told shirt pull, definite penalty.
Yeah.
But there's been loads of games where there's been shirt pulls in the box at a corner kick or whatever, and there's not been penalties given. So there lies the inconsistency. So I just think I was disappointed to hear that Swedish supporters got a vote on whether or not they would like it or not, because I just feel that it does interrupt the game, and it interrupts your enjoyment of the game. Yes, it gets some things right that you wouldn't get otherwise. I know we've had offside goals that have been ruled in our favour in recent weeks and all the rest of it, but this 8 minutes of injury time at the end of a first half proves to me that there's something majorly wrong. You shouldn't be needing to take that length of time to decide on a decision which is blatantly obvious. If you're watching it back and that's all you're doing, nobody's texting you to disrupt you while you're doing your job. You know, you're watching that. You should be able to decide straight away. And I don't think they're brave enough to decide straight away. I think that's why there's a deliberation, because they obviously just start doubting themselves or second guessing themselves or worry about the repercussions if they don't do the right thing or
they want to give it a bit of that with the responsibility as well. They want to say, right, okay, this isn't my decision. I'm going to have to, go and have a look at it or take some advice elsewhere. Yeah. Ultimately, it is the ref's decision, but I think there's a lot of that. But that point of playing, let's say 7 or 8 minutes after, injury time after the game, but also doing it at half time means that 15 minutes after the full time whistle was meant to be blown, you've still got fans in the crowd. And I don't mean people who just want to leave early so that they miss the traffic. I'm talking people who have travelled over from Ireland, JP, who have been told you must be in the bus at this time because we need to leave so that we can catch the ferry. And it's like, that for me isn't being taken into consideration. The fan experience, as you say, you can't celebrate, that's not been taken into consideration. Do people forget that why you go to the football? I mean, that emotional element of it is being affected, whereby is it a goal, is it not a goal? That spontaneous reaction to your team scoring a goal is being completely adversely affected by this, and the authorities really need to do something about it. That's before we get on to livelihoods and points lost and points won where they shouldn't be. because that's also a massive part of it. Dan,
just on that before you read out Daniel's comment, can you imagine if the Anthony Ralston goal at Dingwall had been disallowed? Can you imagine? Like, I can only think the bedlam that would have caused if that had been disallowed. You know, imagine it was like, I don't know, there was a foul in the build up to it or something like that. And suddenly you go for celebrating a last minute winner in the 97th minute to, oh, actually, it's one each and we've left with a point.
Unthinkable. Unthinkable. Daniel does make a point. It's on the Mikey Johnston discussion. Let's not get carried away with him with his performance last night. That's an extremely poor Ireland team. And let's be honest, a poor team they were playing against as well, Latvia. He's not good enough for the Sands team. Listen, Daniel, I don't disagree with that. And I think that I go back to what JP said earlier on. I want him to have a good career. I want him to do well. I don't think it'll be at Celtic Park. And that's unfortunate because I think he's shown so much potential. There was probably a point where you thought he was going to come in and be a player like James Forrest, in that he'll be at Celtic for 10, 15 years and be a staple part. I don't see that happening, and that's very unfortunate, but I do want him to have a good career. Now, before we go, because we're into the last 4 minutes, JP, we are going down to Liverpool at the weekend, not Acsom, but Celtic. 4,000 plus fans are going down to watch the Celtic versus Liverpool charity game, which is tremendous because there are going to be 3 charities, including the foundation, who will benefit from this particular match. And obviously you can debate all day as to who is a Celtic legend and who isn't and all this kind of stuff. But what I do like about it is the fact that there's that relationship between the two clubs, because I grew up thinking that there was a kind of bond, like a shared state of mind almost between the fan bases for a long time. And we used to see that in testimonial games pretty regularly. It's been 20 years since we faced them in the UEFA Cup run. Obviously, we beat them down at Anfield 2-0 to go through. Tomo and Hartson, by the way, who will be joining me on stage next month. Shameless plug if you want to come along. Tickets on the link under the video. But the Liverpool thing, for me, what I like as well as a charity, is the fact that I quite like having a bond with Liverpool. I don't know, in time with modern football, and I know how much it's changed, but I always felt, certainly back in the day, that there was a bond between the fan bases, JP. Are we losing that a wee bit?
I mean, obviously my English leniencies are towards a different team that play in red in England, but I genuinely don't ever recall having hated Liverpool in any way. Like, I didn't really have any animosity towards them. I still don't really. I mean, obviously that recent result was absolutely horrendous against United, and I'm sure that made a lot of people's lives doing winning that game, but it didn't get me so het up to the point that I was like cursing Liverpool or anything like that. And I think my only dislike of Liverpool was when Souness was involved with them as the manager in the was that early 90s, when he left Rangers.
It would have been, because they won the FA Cup against, I'm going to say Sunderland, and I think the left back for Sunderland that day was Anton Rogan. By the way, there you go.
Okay. No, I think that was probably the fact that he went there maybe tainted them a little bit, but obviously he was a former player. Like, he played for them before he was at Rangers. Am I wrong?
He played well. Yeah, he did, because what happened was he was with Spurs, right? And he didn't get a game. Went to Middlesbrough, learned his trade from the great Bobby Murdoch, by the way, and then got his move to Liverpool, and that's where he really flourished as a player.
Aye, so he obviously had a reason to go back there, but I didn't remember him as a player at Liverpool because I was too young for that, really. But I do remember him being the manager. And I remember just thinking they were quite funny, really, the whole Spice Boy, the guys in the cream suits like Redknapp and Robbie Fowler and all that. And I remember, and I actually said this to Jason McAteer when I met him at an event. I said, I remember you leaning over the camera and saying, I just want to wish Alan Stubbs all the best at Glasgow Celtic. Like he said, it was on. I think it was the day of the FA Cup final, maybe, and there was a camera. Was interviewing 2 players, and McAteer came over and just put his arm around someone's shoulder and said, right to camera, want to wish Alan Stubbs all the best at Glasgow Celtic. The fact that he said Glasgow Celtic as well, I kind of like that, and obviously I think McAteer has Celtic leanings.
He played. Remember he played?
So he did. Ronnie Moran's testimonial.
Yes. Who was the other guest that night? Can you remember? Non-Celtic guest who played with Celtic.
Oh, I don't know. Chick Charnley? No.
Christian Daly.
Oh, really?
Christian Daly played with Celtic that night as well.
But the Liverpool thing, I think they'll always be intrinsically linked. Although I think that maybe as an Everton link as well between Celtic and Everton. I've heard Jason on the Homeboys podcast talk about that. He's a big Everton fan. John Higgins, his brother,
right?
He's a big Everton fan, and he's talked up the bond between Everton and Celtic a few times because he hates Liverpool, and doesn't he like a lot of things actually? Does Jason? But and I don't know the guy, but I've just obviously listened to that podcast since lockdown and to present day. I think I'm sure it'll be a great day out, a great weekend if you're going down for that. It'll be good crack. There's a lot of good bars in Liverpool, and good nightlife as well. And yeah, Anfield's a stadium I would like to go to at some point. I know there's constantly chat of them redeveloping or moving and all the rest of it, and I always regret not going to Highbury before that went. Would have liked to have seen the old Highbury, and just these grounds that are always at risk. Like, I'd still like to go back to the San Siro and see that again before they do away with that, because I know that's on the horizon. It just seems ridiculous to be getting rid of the San Siro. It's such an iconic place. But these games with the legends or non-legends, they're always good. And I've not seen the full lineup for Celtic, but I saw Simon Donnelly's playing, Mark Crosas, Joe Ledley. It's an eclectic Celtic team.
It's Robbie Keane will be playing for a half. He's playing for a half. That's Morrissey's first cousin, by the way, full cousin, Robbie Keane. How insane is that?
Really?
Yeah, Morrissey writes about it in his autobiography. Robbie Keane is his cousin.
Wow.
There you go. Kevin Graham reminds everybody that Kevin and I will be back on this evening at 7:00 because this week, is the return of Screamer Celica. It's been basically on the back burner for a wee while because Kev's been a busy guy. But we returned last night to talk about What's the Story, Morning Glory, and this evening we'll be talking about Be Here Now, the much maligned or the often maligned album Be Here Now. We're going to be giving it another run, see if it's changed with the passing of the years, JP. And quite frankly, I actually still like the album, so I'm looking forward to talking about it. And the reason we're going to be talking about that is because the man who signed Oasis, the man who discovered them at King Tut's Wawa Hut, no less, 30 years later, is coming along to talk to us on Friday. Now, JP has pulled something from the magical shelving system behind them, which also has a picture, and I've just figured out that that's Alan Partridge.
Aye, is I. So that was my, let me count this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th ever gig. And me and my mate Spud got a bus down to Newcastle to see Oasis at Newcastle, on the Be Here Now tour with the telephone box, all of that. And Travis with the support. And it was the night that Newcastle beat Barcelona in the Champions League.
I've got 3 questions for you. Firstly, the Oasis logo on that ticket, is it green like the Acsom one on our screen?
No.
It looks green. It looks green.
It's
black, right. Secondly, right, was that the gig where Liam walks out wearing a Newcastle strip?
Yeah, it was.
Long sleeves.
Aye, because he came out and he was like, it's 1-0, by the way. And the place just went mental because I think it was 0-0 before the gig started.
You imagine being a Man City fan and coming all the way a Newcastle jersey.
I think he just liked the top and somebody must have given it backstage or whatever. And then Noel went, it's 2-0, by the way. And bearing in mind, this is Newcastle in the Champions League against Barcelona. We know what it's like to beat Barcelona and how mental that is. So imagine being in an arena full of pretty much Newcastle fans. Like when Travis were playing, none of the fans were watching Travis. Like me and my mate walked right into the hall, into the standing area. There was maybe 200 or 300 people in watching Travis. Travis were getting a game at that point, and they were starting to become
Big
a
time.
big band. They were.
Yeah.
It was before the Man Who, but all I want to do is rock and good feeling and all that. They were all pretty well-known songs at the time, but nobody cared. Everyone was just like in the foyers in the arena because they had screens up and they were showing the game. And then obviously everybody piled in for Oasis. But yeah, we couldn't get tickets for the SECC, so we got Newcastle tickets, and it was like a bus and ticket deal that took you down. So the ticket face value is $17.50, which
That's
seems
insane.
pretty
JP, you and I will see Oasis together when they get back together, right? Travis, yeah, you're right. And one wee interesting fact about them, as well as Fran being a Celtic fan, Celtic fans appeared on one of their albums. He recorded Celtic fans chanting in a friendly against Fulham, and it ended up on, I think, the 4th album. But on the front cover of the first album, there's a surfboard, and that was a piece of artwork that John Squire did for the band, which is rather bizarre. The other thing I was going to ask you about that ticket, though, JP, what on earth is Liam wearing? It's like a big Aaron jumper, baggy jumper.
Yeah, I that was around about the time where I would have bought anything that Liam wore, or similar, and I think I actually got an Aaron jumper because of that. I remember the footage from the gig where he was wearing that Aaron jumper, and I used to buy. Remember, he had that big, like, kind of brown, almost like a kind of John Motson effort. Like he wore that when he went up to get the Brit Award.
Yep, they had the furry collar. Did you have one of them, JP? Did you?
I got one, yeah. I only wore it like twice, and then I didn't have the chops to wear something as bold as that.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. And I get slagged off for wearing jackets from Matalan. Anything went back in the 90s. The reason, of course, that we are, not the reason, but one of the reasons that Screama Celica is re-emerged is because we're talking Oasis, we're talking McGee, and we're talking the fact that King Tut's are a massive part of that story. And obviously, it's a venue that's very, very close to your heart. It's played a big part in your life, JP. But I remember saying to you that, and I read it in a magazine, and I think I seen it. I went to see a band called Alfie. Remember Alfie?
Mm-hmm.
And they were playing at King Tut's way back. And by the way, I'm totally digressing here, so apologies. But I went to the toilet, and the urinal right across the wall was a wonder wall, right? Mm-hmm. So it was like the metal had 2 different shades. So you're standing there doing your business, and it says Wonderwall in the style of the Oasis writing right along the urinal, the whole length of the wall. And then I read in a magazine, or before I went, I read in a magazine like Q or Vox or something, that Noel had actually paid as a thank you, because obviously it was such a big part of Oasis's history. He paid to get that installed at the venue. And I've asked so many people about this, and I'm starting to doubt myself. Was that a thing? Did it happen? Can anybody confirm it?
I'll tell you next week. I'll ask Dave, or one of the Daves, or Davey the Wolf, who works at Tuts. He'll know.
Davey the Wolf, is that what he gets called?
Well, he's just known affectionately as the Wolf. And I think that's got nothing to do with Pulp Fiction or
Winston Wolfe.
It's got nothing to do with him. I actually can't remember the reasoning behind his nickname, but he'll know because he knows everything about Tuts prior to my time and everything else. I mean, I'm pretty well versed on 2014 onwards, but I don't know everything about the past. I mean, I actually know the guy who started. Could definitely remember more about it. The guy who started DF Concerts and started King Tut's. His daughter is now working for us at the venue, having grown up in New Zealand,
right?
And that's where Stuart Clumpus now lives in New Zealand, and has been there for 20 odd years or whatever. But he started DF Concerts in Dundee, and then took over Saints and Sinners in St Vincent Street, called it King Tut's Wawa Hut, and started booking bands, and then realised that there was an opportunity to do a festival or create a festival to give the bands that they'd been booking somewhere a bigger stage to play within Scotland, and no one else was doing a festival like that other than Glastonbury, really. So they went for Tea in the Park, and that's how it started. And you think about how much of an impact that had on so many people's lives.
Huge.
Yeah. I mean, it was a rite of passage to go to Tea in the Park.
I know.
I went every year from '98 till the end, bar 2004, in protest against the darkness being moved up to the place David Bowie.
I love that. That. My brother went to every one of them. I didn't go to all of them. My brother was at the very first one when Oasis and Blur both played in '94. And neither of the two of them were on the main stage. And the main stage was Rage Against the Machine. Aye, they were intense. And Cypress Hill and Rage, I think, appeared on the stage together at some point.
Yeah, that's right.
Let me have a wee look here. Couple of people coming in. Yep, I've peed many a time on Tuts Wonderwall. Where is it now? Is that up the loft with everything else in Tuts?
Yeah, there's quite a lot of artifacts in the loft, but I don't think that's there. I definitely think I would have to go up there to get towels and the malt whiskies that we give when you sell out Tuts.
Oh, right.
And I have to climb up there, and I've never seen a urinal in the loft. It would be apparent if it was there.
What did I call it? Wool? I don't know what I called it. Sorry, Robert. I mean, I just wanted to get the point out there because I couldn't believe JP had the same jacket.
I got it in what's that? Macro. That's where I got it. Remember Macro?
Aye. I do. Aye.
I got
definitely.
It. Yeah.
Macro. Listen, we could go on forever, but yes, the reason we're talking about one final question. You mentioned the guy that set up DF. Was the D in DF Dundee? Is that what it stood for? No.
Dance Factory.
Dance Factory, there you go. The things you learn on a Thursday edition of A Celtic State of Mind. Thanks everybody for getting involved. If you want to come along and see me on stage with Alan McGee, then please do so, because obviously I'm now interviewing not only my heroes that played with Celtic, but other people that in the music world I never ever thought I'd ever meet, never mind share a stage with. So I'm really looking forward to Alan McGee on the stage Friday night at Barra's Art and Design. And if you want to come along, I think there's 21 tickets available, and the link is underneath this video. I love Thursday afternoon chatting away to JP. I've got to thank everybody for getting involved. But what's left for me to say is once again, JP Mason, thank you for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Cheers, Paul.